Morning Express is where you're at. Thank you for joining us. It is now 7 minutes after 7, and it is time for the newsroom. And remember, this is a conversation that you can join in, and you can do that via Twitter. Do let us know what your take is on some of the subjects that we're going to be handling here. And the Twitter handle is at Michael G. Gitonga. And let me start, first of all, by introducing the panel that we have this morning. I'll start with Patrick Gadara, who's a cartoonist and communications expert or advisor or...
Well, very many of those.
One of those. Thank you for coming and welcome. We also have Eric Latif, who is a senior news editor, Capital FM. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.
Nancy Buka, who is chair, Media and Journalism Department, Multimedia University.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And last but not least, Clay Muganda, who is editor with Standard newspaper. Thank you for joining us. A great panel we have this morning. And let's start off with,
no politicians today.
Sorry? No what?
No politicians today.
No, none today. But let's start off with our war on terrorism. There's been a story that's been, well, this is a story that's been unfolding as we go along. But we also have the two girls who recently were in the paper yesterday. Now we have another boy who's joined them, who's a law student, who is suspected to, have disappeared and maybe have joined a terror group. And let me start with you, Eric. The war on terrorism, from our side as journalists, have we poked every possible avenue, asked the right question? Because it looks to me that it is deliberate, that they're targeting very young people and professionals.
Did you make a statement or did you ask?
I asked, have we asked the right question? Have we poked the right hole?
To be very honest and self-criticism, we haven't. Because you see, we are now looking at how many, we are just reporting that this child is missing and the other child is missing, and there's what we are not doing, which is asking the whys and the hows, and especially what's this caliber of people that are being looked for and why are they being looked for? So I think we haven't really gotten there.
Okay. Nancy, what would you say? Have we done our job? Are we merely just, I'm sure Gadara would say, reporting as it happens, as opposed to now the investigative journalism, where we actually now look at what their strategy might be and try and almost preempt?
I don't think we have done enough, in terms of exhausting the coverage. And part of it is not because journalists don't know what to cover, but because sometimes you do not know, the terrorists always seem to be ahead of the game. And so, and then again, the fact that many of our journalists are not trained on reporting and covering terror makes it a little more complicated. This is something that, I think in the last 2-3 years has come to the limelight. Prior to this, we had terror attacks, all right, but not with the kind of magnitude that we have them now. Every 2 to 3 months there is an alert, and almost every year there's an attack. Sometimes 2-3 of them in a year, and what this means is that there needs to be that kind of sustained coverage. In terms of complete reporting, you cannot have that unless you have dedicated desks that actually do that. That you have the capacity, the journalists who understand terror and who can report it to its completeness.
Okay, you're in the Multimedia University, and you've talked about training. What are our journalists being trained? Why don't we have that coming out?
Good question. One of the things that happens is that, in terms of, when we talk about, curriculum development, curriculum takes time, for it to change. There's a certain period or a certain duration within which you can make certain changes. In the curriculum across many of the universities in this country, we don't have courses in terror reporting. What we do have are courses in conflict-sensitive reporting. But you see, terror is unique in itself. And one of the things that we are trying to do, for example, at Multimedia, is have journalists who cover terror is have the media council come in to talk to the students, but we don't have a standalone course as such, that covers, that basically exhausts reporting and covering of terror, which is something that we're in the process of doing, but we're not there yet, because we also need to have the local capacity that can be able to handle that. Yeah.
Okay, Gadara, do you think that's a solution that with time we need now to develop a specific curriculum for a journalist that deals specific just with terror?
Well, I think that yes, you do need to train people in how to report on. Well, I think on conflict, because terrorism really is just a tactic, and it is. We need to go a bit deeper into causes of this. Why are people going across? And I think fundamentally one of the failures that we have within our press is a distinct lack of curiosity. As in, this is not the first time we've heard of people leaving their places, young people, and going and joining terror groups. We know for a long time in Somalia, we had lots of young men coming out of Europe, out of America, to come and fight with Shabab. But we never asked, was that happening here? Even after Garissa, where there was all this splash about the lawyer who went and joined Shabab and then committed, was one of the attackers. Still, I was surprised there was no follow-up. How many people are actually doing this? So again, it's very episodic. It's, these two girls, then we forget about it. And somebody else turns up, then we forget about it. The other day, I think it was Gamel was saying about 20 people are missing. They can't be accounted for. Where are these people? And is it just those 20? Do we have many more guys who've gone across? If you remember, in the aftermath of Kenya going into Somalia in 2011, the Standard did a story about how many Kenyans had joined, and there was this one just ethnic Somalis, they were from all across the country who were joining. In fact, Kenya was the largest contingent, foreign contingent or non-Somali contingent within Al-Shabaab, was made up of non-Somali Kenyans. Where are these people coming from? How are they getting there? And I think our media could do a much better job instead of waiting for government to tell us this is what's happening. We actually dig a bit deeper and try and surface these stories.
All right, Clay, your take. I know you're one who really pushes for respect of journalists. They need to stand up to be seen in this particular, case.
I would like to agree with my colleagues here, but at the same time, I think I want to disagree on some aspects. It's true that we've not probably covered this so well, these particular cases. But I would.
Is it just these three cases?
These particular cases, first of all. But as I always tell Gadara here, this is an unfolding story. I think we'll probably get there. You see,
that's a problem. It's always
an unfolding story.
Get there. But having said that, I think what we ideally lack is we lack a worldview, because people coming from other countries and joining IES or joining these terror groups is not something that actually, it's not happening now. It's been happening, and I mean, other international networks have been reporting this, and actually they've been giving reasons as to why these young people or professionals are joining IS or these terror groups, because they're actually looking for professionals. I mean, why is it that now they're targeting women? You see, because these are people who are looking for doctors, they're fighters, they're looking for doctors, they're looking for engineers, because what they actually want is to set up a state. You see, so they have to look for all these professionals, people who will actually grow up with them, grow up in this state and understand. So that is the view that we actually lack, and that's why we've not poked enough holes.
So do we wait for this story to continue unfolding, or do we need to actually now begin to find out, like you're saying, why is it that they're targeting lawyers? I think this is the second or third very young lawyer we've seen. So definitely there's a breed that they're looking
but
for.
You see, one thing we fail to understand is that actually these terrorist groups always look for professionals. They don't just look for lout and tout and all that people who are just going to fight. that's why they look for people who understand these ideologies, people who understand that whichever religion they're actually fighting for, or rather whichever religion that they're using to fight, they need people who understand. Because if you look at the people who've been, those people who've been beheading guys in the IS people, they're not people, they're people who are well educated. So we need to understand that. When it comes to training, which Nancy mentioned, I have to throw it back to the universities, because between 1998 and now, we've churned out, the universities have churned out very many journalists. And it is so funny that actually between that time and now, they've never thought about coming up with this, we call it curriculum development, of how to cover terrorism or how to cover terror. So I think it goes back to the universities, because you cannot leave this to the newsrooms. Yeah, you cannot leave this to the newsrooms, actually, that we need to train these people in-house. Yeah.
I think I'd beg to differ with Clay. What the universities have not done is have standalone courses in terror reporting. But most of the universities locally have courses in conflict-sensitive reporting. And we must also realize that in the 90s, you know, in as much as we were dealing with terrorism, there were other forms of conflict that we were dealing with, and we needed to be sensitive to that. I think what has happened in the last 2 to 3 years is that terror has taken a life of its own, a different type of conflict that needs certain sensitivities, which you might not be able to exhaust in a course that just covers conflict-sensitive reporting. There are certain, risks that are specific to terror reporting that you may not have to contend with when you're dealing with, covering other forms of conflict. And it is these areas that, in as much as we have tried, we still haven't, totally exhausted that. I mean, you can't say that at the end of the 4 years, you're producing a graduate who can, exhaustively cover terror, because it's a learning curve. And even within the newsrooms, I think when the Garissa attack happened, we sat here and asked ourselves, how have we done, compared to how we covered Westgate? And I think it was agreed here that we have done much better, with this one than we did Westgate. And what does this mean? That for journalists, for for those of us in the academy, it's a learning curve. We sit down and, we are asking ourselves, I ask myself, what are some of the changes that then we need to bring into the curriculum that then would take care of this? And that the coverage that the media houses have done are good case scenarios that we then, are also able to use within, within the academy. So we wouldn't blame media houses totally, and neither can the academy be blamed. I think we are all trying to learn this, and maybe in a couple of years we've
we've taken so long to learn this. Because
no, we haven't.
It has evolved. I mean, from the days when Norfolk was attacked, from the days of hijacking.
The buck has to stop somewhere.
Yes,
it has to stop somewhere. Eric,
and I think we're being
what
very
do you think
slow.
we need to do to improve our journalism now in regards to this? Because like Nancy has mentioned, there's a risk factor. There's the idea of intelligence. I mean, we definitely need some degree of investigative know-how, because you're going into high-risk areas.
Well, when you mention investigative know-how, I'd like to know what, for example, Nancy teaches in terms of investigative journalism. But then again, I think it lies on both sides. One, she'll have to produce students or graduates who will suit into the current market. And when she's looking at the current market and the editors in the newsrooms are not actually assigning this kind of jobs, then she'll give us what we want. Well, so I think it also comes to the newsrooms and how we also look at it. But I also think it's a good thing that these things are actually now happening, because it forces the news desks to start thinking, what is the next angle?
When you say good thing, these things are happening.
I mean, that's a journalist. From a journalistic point of view, it's a good thing that they're happening.
It's a good thing that we actually now are starting to highlight. It's not the first time. I mean, though, earlier, about 7 years ago, there was a lot of stories about kids in Garissa crossing over, kids in Coast crossing over. All these ones were coming back, crossed over a long time ago. But now we are reporting more. So the next angle is, what else? What else can we tell about? I mean, we have to stop talking about, 2 girls have been taken to court, 3 boys have been arrested,
and
we
the
crossed
story
over.
stops there.
Now the story stops there. So the news desk will have to actually think, what's the next angle? That's what I'm saying, it's a good thing. And we'll also now start forcing the universities to give us graduates who are thinking that way.
Okay.
Let me just respond to something that he has raised about, how are we building capacity for investigative journalism? And yes, we do have courses, at least at Multimedia where I work, we have courses in investigative journalism that are not only taught by, lecturers, but we bring in a lot of guest speakers who have covered investigative stories to come and share the experiences with the students. But we also must realize that training can only do so much, and media houses also they need to take it up from a certain angle. When you look at the current media market, how many investigative journalists do we have? In as much as they're trained, what is it that actually sells? Investigative journalism is very expensive for many of the newsrooms. You can only be able to do so much. Media houses can only be able to sustain a certain number of investigative reporters at any one given time because of the attendant costs that come with, completing, investigating a story to its logical end, if you can be able to do that. What has actually sold over the last couple of years is, the ribbon cutting events. That's what many, the politicians. That's what that's what is easy for many. For many of the newsrooms. No. Let me finish. Let me finish. No, let me finish. Yes. Yeah. Let me finish. What has happened is, as a result of the social media taking over, so that it's no longer news when you're telling me something that I can be able to get on social media. The difference in many of these media houses is the investigative reporting. When I watch KTN, what stands out for me is the investigative stories. When I'm reading the Standard, the investigative stories take the newsroom
to a different level.
a different level.
Okay. Eric.
I haven't interviewed anyone who's come fresh out of university, from Multimedia or any other university of late, and they've come out looking like, well, they actually are really good in the investigative.
Well, they can't be good. They cannot be good.
Let him finish. Give you a chance.
The second thing is, these are universities. Like we said, you have all the time and the capacity to actually develop students in investigative journalism. You can also even get funding to expand that investigative journalism course. I have not, and I'm sure Joe Ageo and his teams of editors here can tell you, they have not been approached by the head of department at Multimedia University and told, look, we have a team of very good investigative journalists who have gone and done this kind of story. Look at it. Would you air it? Because we have outlets. You can come with your students and show us this is an investigative piece that we did as a class of MMU 2015.
And it is newsworthy. It can be aired.
Air it.
Point of correction.
It's all very interesting to see the buck being passed around here. But I think we also need to be cognizant of the limitations that our media have or impose upon themselves, depending on where you stand. As Nancy said, it is expensive to do this investigative journalism, especially on this particular aspect of covering terror groups. It is not just expensive, it's quite dangerous. These are groups that specifically target journalists. Al-Shabaab has been notorious for a long time for killing journalists in Somalia. We've seen ISIS behead journalists. We've seen all these terror groups go after journalists. So it's not just the fact that it's expensive, it's also very dangerous work. So we need to be cognizant of this.
Of the challenges
that but I
they
think
face.
One thing I will say is we need to veer away from the kind of simplistic narratives that we tend to hear. I'll start with one that Kleja said here, that these guys are recruiting lawyers, doctors, etc. because they want to build a state. Actually, it's these lawyers and staff and highly educated people who are committing terror attacks. You don't really build a state when you have your elite going out to kill themselves. So the fact is there is much more here than simply that they want to get or they're targeting lawyers, etc. They're really targeting youth that is alienated.
Okay, so the point here is that...
One last thing I'll say, and this because it's been covered a lot, and there's been a link made between radicalization and terrorism. Now, there was an article done by Rolling Stone magazine last year that pretty much debunked this, that radicalization per se does not necessarily lead to terrorism. You know, and actually by focusing on this, we're probably missing the real reason why people end up. A lot of the guys in these terror groups are not radicalized. They are not, they don't have extremist view per se, as in they're extremist Muslim, they're guys with long beards, etc. A lot of them are like the guy who was killing guys in ISIS, you know, simply designated youth, a guy who gets a chance to be on TV, on national TV, blah, blah, you know, and enjoys the notoriety. You know, so we need to focus a bit more on what the causes are and not simply buy in the sort of regurgitated nonsense that comes out of government.
All right, Clay, talking about, you know, investigative journalism and focusing on causes, just recently we had the Ethiopian soldiers come into Kenya and, you know, went to a police station. It is reported that they took pictures, and on questioning the IG, his statement is that it's not clear why they got into the country. Okay. Are we going to leave that to just lie until now we discover why? And since it's unfolding.
Before I say it's an unfolding story. You know, Nancy cannot stop talking. She's a teacher, and that's what she does for a living. So she'll go on it. Anyway, I think journalism by its own nature is investigative. Every story you have to investigate. Everything about journalism is investigative. It only depends now on the depth of the investigative story. And I don't buy the thing that I mean, what makes the news most of the time is ribbon cutting ceremonies and stuff like that. But going back to what we were saying, I think we need to throw this thing back at. We need to look back at, as Gadara says, that it's deeper than this. We need to look back at our education system also. We cannot just throw this thing back at the newsrooms and all that, the media houses. I think we need to look at our education system and see how well we are actually catching up with the trends, be they terrorism trends or world trends basically, or conflict reporting. And I want to agree with Museveni. One time he said that you spend so much time studying things like conflict management. What will happen when there is no conflict? You see, he once asked that. Anyway, back to your question about these guys.
Yes, the Ethiopian soldiers.
I think this thing, we need to dig deeper and find out more, because so far the answer from the government is not adequate, though they'll probably say that this was adequate. I listened to news last night, and there was this story about somebody saying like, I heard about it, a government official saying, I heard about it, I heard that those people were in the country taking pictures and all that. Then somebody says like, I actually heard about it and I informed the next person or the authorities, the higher authorities and all that, and nothing was done about it. I think this is a story that, yes, the journalists, the media can do as much as possible to try and find out how, but I think the onus lies with the government, because this is all about safety. It's about
yes,
about
at the end
safety.
of the day, of course, it's the government that can it's only the government really that can do something about it. Yeah. But what do we need to do to ensure that we put them to task to do that? Because if the IG, who is supposed to be in charge of my security, says it is not clear. I mean, as a layman, it is not rocket science for an Ethiopian army to come into the country, take pictures and disappear.
If I may say something,
I think we need to push them further, as we've always done. I mean, even though Gadara never agrees, as we've always done, we have to ask to push them further to give answers not just to the media but to Kenyans.
Yes.
Yeah, we have to do this for Kenyans.
I think
otherwise, if we don't, they'll keep on glossing over the facts the way they've started doing. And I think they need to come. We need to come out strongly, and have this thing. I mean, make them give answers. Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the case of the Ethiopian, let's call it an incursion or visit, whatever it is, there are two things. First, the fact that we had 9 people at this police station. It's about 16 kilometers from the border. You know. And that this is not the first time it's happened. I mean, I would ask what has been the response of government to this. And I think across the gamut of security-related failures that we've had, I don't think there's been enough querying, if you will, about government responses to the stuff we have. Just putting aside the attacks themselves. Let's take an example of the cars that government was meant to have procured for police. They've been announcing it, that they've procured 1,200 cars. And then was it yesterday or the day before, Monica Juma goes to Parliament and says 700 of these 1,200 cars have not been delivered. This is something they've been talking about since November of 2013, 18 months, telling us they've set aside money, they've actually procured the vehicles. But the police don't have them. And I find it curious that our press doesn't go and ask, where are these cars? You're saying there is 1,200 of them, where are they? Show it to us. So in terms of, when it comes to security, we seem very much to kowtow to what government is saying, to report it as if it is truth simply because
that's the parental authority.
The fact is, the job of the press should be to query what government is doing, to highlight where it's failing so that it can be fixed.
Do you think that, because some of these are questions which seem very logical, I mean, you'd not need really to sit in a class to, have some of these questions asked to the end. Where is the miscommunication between our journalism and having that question answered? If there are those cars that were supposed to have been delivered by then and they're not, why are we not asking that question?
Probably because we want it to be a developing story. So you want to cover part A today, part B tomorrow, but that's just joking. I don't know. To be very honest with you, I do not know why we do not do this, but at the same time, also, stepping back a little bit, I think what we do is we have a story. For example, Monica Juma says that, we start from the government says 1,300 vehicles have been procured for the police, and we take it as that, and we are carried away by other things in the newsroom.
Other developing stories.
Until Monica Juma goes to Parliament and she says 700 haven't come. Right, 700 haven't come. And she's asked, of course, by the parliamentarians why, and she gives a reason, and we put that as a reason, and then we are carried away by the next developing story, which is what we're saying, that sometimes, and I'll go back to what Nance was mentioning, sometimes having dedicated desks to do some things would help, because if somebody's job is mainly to report on security matters, and then you have not one person but many people, there's somebody who's reporting on security matters from various angles, from the policy angle, from the development angle, from the daily occurrences angle,
right,
then you'll be able to have somebody who's basically dedicated to following up that question and getting that question answered. But if you have one crime reporter who's a crime reporter, and then he has to do, what happened last night, and we have to look at what's happened in Garissa, and then we have to report that, the Ethiopians visited our police station and they took photos, selfies.
So we need, there needs to be.
I may very quickly just jump in on one thing that Eric has highlighted here. I think that it's not so much that we report and we go away. I think we miss the significance of some of the things that are being said, and I think we tend to veer towards what is sensational. I'll give an example. Yesterday, on NTV, when they were reporting about this, a report from the Auditor General, that the wage bill debate, the whole thing was made up, was essentially fake. We don't have a wage bill crisis. Their lead thing was the president mistaken in giving up his salary? Not whether they actually misled the country, and portrayed a situation that didn't exist. And I think this tendency to miss the significance of stuff. When Monica Juma sits up and says that 700 vehicles haven't been delivered, when her boss went to Parliament in his State of the Nation address and said that we had already given out these 1,200 vehicles, that is significant. This is a government that is really dealing with the PR aspect of things, not dealing with the issues that are there. And it's the same way we should be looking at things like this Ethiopian thing and asking, if it's the third time it has happened, if it has come in the direct aftermath of a joint team between Kenyans and Ethiopians that went to demarcate the border, they went to survey the border, what is going on? Is this being raised at higher levels? Who's talking to who? etc. So we need to be clear that some of these events do have significance beyond the fact that they are sensational.
Okay, let's just move on the conversation, and maybe I'll come to you, Nancy, talking about maybe having a dedicated desk for specific, challenges that we may have in media. And look at, for instance, Mpeketoni, 1 year on, and that's a story that we could easily forget. Garissa is still very fresh in our minds, and remember, 148 is not just a number. But over time, over a year, will we still have that conversation? I think Francis Ontomwa did a story on Monday, Mpeketoni, 1 year on, and there's so many promises that the government made. The former Interior Secretary, Olelenku, made a promise and said that shops are going to be opened, we're going to make, but none of that has happened.
Like they put a curfew.
They put a curfew. Yeah, if anything, they put a curfew and people are not even able to operate. Why do we have to wait for the celebration day, as it were, 1 year on?
Commemoration day or something. Part of it is, first of all, I liked the story, although 1 year later, brings the reality to some of the promises that had been made that haven't been made. The story had a human interest angle to it, the kind of fear that most of those families are living in. 1 year later, the fatherless homes, the many widows who were left, as a result of that, and the parents who've lost, who've lost their sons, in that. A very emotive piece there, but. The question that I asked myself is, did we have to wait 1 year? And I can't blame, media houses 100%. I mean, it's not only Mpeketoni that, they're following on a day-to-day basis. I think there's a time we said we are always looking for the next big thing. And sometimes you don't have to look for it. It happens. And you have to dedicate reporters, and your whole news operation to that particular story. I think what this means, because there are other institutions, and I think we have said that media can only do enough. We can only be able to go to a certain extent, and somebody else needs to take it up from there. That conversation was important, for us to have at this point. Maybe we should have had it a lot earlier, but the 1 year later provided, I think, an opportune time for us to have that conversation. What I am hoping as a media consumer to see is, that there is some action towards it, and other than just talking about the commemoration or 1 year later, I think we need to sustain that kind of reporting
to follow up on
the stories.
All right, Clay.
I think what's going on here, as as Nancy says, we cannot put everything on the media, and I keep on saying this also most of the time. The whole problem here is that you do have the parental authority here, the government, that is. It's the government that is lying to the people. So the media is trying very much to uncover the truth, but the government keeps on lying to you, because about this 1,200 vehicles, I remember Mr. Ruto saying this so many times that actually they've not been bought, they've been hired or leased or something like that. And right now, I mean, even this story to come out, I mean, that the invasion of the incursion of the invasion, I mean, we got it through the media, and if at all, the other two instances, the media did not report, and that's why probably we never got to know about it. And actually we're knowing it through the media now, and that's why the government is now responding, and probably it will respond with more lies. I think we need to put the honest lies with the government, because it is the parental authority. And I tweeted this the other day: as you go about your duties, remember this: you never voted in any journalist, and at the same time you never pay taxes to any media house. You see, so the first person you should actually be asking these questions is, we can only be a conduit, just a minute, we can only be a conduit as to help channel these things. But after we've done that, I think the people also need to take it up. We cannot always be blaming the media, That's why actually we are the fourth estate outside the three main ones. You see, the people you pay taxes to, we also pay taxes. So I am not saying that the media is totally blameless, but we can only do as much And we should actually note the first port of call when there's a problem should not be the first port of call, or the first place where you should lay blame should not be the media. It should actually be the government.
Again,
that's the parental authority.
Okay, two things. First, I really have a problem with the idea of government as a parent or a parental authority. I mean, that's a phrase I wouldn't really use. Government is there to do a job, and I agree with you that the government is failing in its job. My point is, how do people keep government on its toes?
Check.
How do they hold it to account? They need information in order to do this. And this is my thing: is we need to be tying in, telling complete stories as far as we could, that bring in all the other aspects, that explain that these things are not just one-time events. It's not just a one-time failure, but that it has roots very deep in how government conducts itself with regard to security. So when we look at all this stuff that's going on, whether it's the procurement of vehicles and the fact that they are, they don't seem to take this seriously. I mean, yesterday Kaiseri was complaining about the budget, the cuts to his budget. And one of the things that he was saying is, for training, he doesn't have a budget, for vehicles, he doesn't have a budget, etc. So we have to ask, are we putting our eggs, or is government putting the money where it's supposed to be going?
Okay, I know media
let me just finish.
Okay.
I think that the job of the media is to tie this, to tell people these are the questions you should be asking your representatives. These are the issues you should be raising with them. I'm not saying that the media needs to go and man the border, of course not. But they should be
to raise the
it's to raise, to tell people these are the questions you
we
need to
raise,
ask,
but you see, this government has so many.
Government has an interest in
talking
line.
about a full story. I mean, let's just take an example of the president the other day came out and publicly said 10 million spent on buses per month is absolutely ridiculous. And we have reported and said that's what he said, but really we're just reporting verbatim. Has anybody gone and found out why is this happening? Although the Star, I think, was yesterday, the way they had featured that KAA has also come out and said we've actually not received.
But one thing I would say with regard
has not received any payment for the guys who got the buses.
From the government.
with regard to
from whoever is supposed to be
with
paid.
regard to the buses,
73,000 per day.
It's true that the president goes out and he says that this is exorbitant. We're paying 11 million per month for 5 buses. But nobody then asks him, why are we paying 3 billion a year for 1,200 cars, to lease 1,200 cars? No, that comes out to 2.5 million a year per car. We could be buying new cars.
Instead of leasing. Eric, why do you think we're not
for what we are
those
spending to
questions
lease them?
And telling the full story, what Gadara is calling the full story?
I think Gadara has just made it, into another different story. I mean, the story about corruption at the KAA and supposed corruption via leasing is different. I think if you were to ask the president that question and he wrote to me the story, I'd be like, okay, you lost me. Stick with one story, which is
that government steals from us.
The corruption. That's a bigger picture. But here the story is that the story at KAA, why haven't we asked? You don't know.
Or
First
give
of
the
all-
full story.
No. The story is developing. Investigations actually happen. If the president says this on a Saturday, you will not expect that somebody will come and give you a proper story on Monday that this is what happened. So you've got to get documentation, you've got to ask questions, you've got to see how far have investigations gone, you've got to see has EACC taken up the story, so that you bring out the story. So let's give it time and see. It could be developing. I hope actually it's developing. But you see, that's the kind of thing that I'm saying. However, I wanted to say that the good thing about what's going to happen in future is our media is actually expanding. We have very many newsrooms that are coming up. We have very many media houses that are coming up, and they want to tell a story. And then we also have an audience that is demanding of a story. They want to know, and having a champion like Gadara, it's a good thing. You see what Alex Chamwado is doing, a lone journalist who dedicates himself into doing a specific story and goes and does it and brings it to a media house. That's what I see as happening in the future. where, for example, Multimedia University will sponsor a couple of students to go and do a specific story and bring a story into
Which they can sell or have
or give for free.
Or give for free.
You know, but that is the kind of thing that will help, because the main thing that we've talked about here is capacity in the media, and we can't run away from that. We have capacity issues in the media. We've got competing interests
That's
in a
true.
media house. I mean, you're there to make money, and do you want to spend all the money chasing a story, or do you want to balance between, you know, giving a story and doing the other things of running a business?
Okay.
So we have all those competing
Nancy.
interests.
Yeah, I think you know, the KAA story. What you know, what we had was basically just, you know, what I would call a lead. You know, what the president said was a lead that, you know, then reporters or a journalist should be able to follow
Pick
through
that up.
and ask, you know, some of those questions, not to him, not to the president, but you know, unearth, you know, why is this happening? First of all, who pays for this? And you know, that you could find that, you know, there's a whole different arrangement there. I think the challenge oftentimes is, you know, and I like that now, you know, Eric talks about capacity, and capacity here is not just, you know, so much in terms of the numbers of the journalists that are available, but capacity, you know, in terms of how well the journalists are taken care of, so that they and the tools that they have to be able to do this. Following up stories, which would be a safe way to go, where we are following up the story, takes time. And most of these stories then would take a lot of time, a lot of dedicated time to be able to unearth that. Do we have the capacity to do that? Maybe not, you know, because of the competing interests.
So are we building the capacity?
I think we are building the capacity. What competition is doing is it's opening up the space, opening up in the space in the sense that what is it that distinguishes one media house from another? It's no longer just reporting the, you know, the news of the day, but going deeper into issues, so that if tomorrow there's a station that, you know, runs a promo before their news to tell me that within their news bulletin they're going to, you know, unearth, you know, what is it that's happening at KAA, I'm going to listen, I'm going to watch that station, I'm going to read that newspaper, and not one that just, you know, reports, who said what, where, when. And that is what competition is doing. That is now what's going to separate real journalism from, you know, the other kind of journalism.
Okay, Clay.
Can I put in a word on this KA thing?
Yes,
I mean,
very briefly, because I want us to move on now.
For
and
me,
I know
this
will be your best subject on
it's a
respect to
bigger
journalism.
story. It's a bigger story. It's a story outside the newsroom. Basically, I mean, it's not something that actually for the journalist, for the media, basically. But what we need to ask here is this: the chief executive officer, the chief executive of the country, sounds exasperated. Why didn't you come to me? So that this is KAA is a quasi-state body, isn't it? And here is a case where Mr. Kenyatta has, I don't think there is one facility he's visited more times, probably, I mean, that he's visited more times than JKIA. For him to come 6 or 8 or 10 months later to discover what are, it says a lot more about the way this government operates. I mean, for him to discover this 10 months or 12 months later, that actually, oh, why didn't you come to me to give you buses at 300,000? I mean, what is the communication channels? How come KAA did not actually know that NYS can actually lease these buses?
400,000.
Yeah, and one more thing also,
Clay,
another thing also, it speaks volumes a lot about the procurement process. I remember one time there's a former PS who kept on punching holes in this procurement act, or whatever it is that is called, that it is robotic. It stops people from thinking, in as much as their companies, or rather their government institutions that pay for 400 bob for a packet of milk because that was the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
You see, that was the
Yeah,
lowest
but
one.
it's not that it
yeah.
stops them from thinking.
No,
I mean,
in
this
as
is
much as,
obvious,
just a minute, let me tell you, in as much
collusion.
as,
People are stealing.
no, in as much as if I told you you're thinking, you'd actually decide like, no, I'll go to the next kiosk and buy that packet of milk at 30 bob. But the procurement process says like, you have to invite bids. Another thing also, it speaks volumes about the government payment process. These people sometimes inflate. I was told this by a governor friend of mine, is that anytime you're dealing with the government and you want to lease out something, it takes so long for the government to pay. So when these people are charging you, they factor in all the time that you will take.
The time frame.
the time frame. So that's how you end up paying 73,000 shillings for a bus per day, because probably the government will pay after 6 months or after 12 months or after 2 years. You see,
Okay,
so you factor in your interest. So these are all the angles to this story. I'm just educating
I
you.
understand what you're saying. But what
Yeah.
I'm saying is this: the president went to JKIA to open a new terminal.
But wait,
You know,
we are going
quickly.
into the
Yeah,
actual
yeah. But just-
subject, whereas
yeah.
we're looking at our reporting.
Yeah.
Just a quick thing about something that was not covered. You know, in JKIA, he went to open a new terminal. This is what, 2 years after the other
The
one
fire.
burnt down. You know, what caused that fire? Till today, we don't know. You know, the government says that there was an electrical fault, that there's a report that nobody has seen. You know, and I find it curious that our journalists don't go asking, where is this? It was mentioned briefly about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago in Parliament, where they were saying
Boss,
that this
we
is
don't
a
have the
fire.
UNCO report.
I know,
Really.
but
What are
they're
you
not
talking
going
about?
and asking, where is this report? It was
What
done,
caused the
released to the
fire?
Ministry of Transport, and it died there. Nobody has seen it since. It's never been published.
Okay, let's move on to something else. And I know, Clay, you're the one who really pushes for respect of journalists and, you know, the journalism fraternity. And there's a story here in the Star where the Pumwani Hospital is blaming, actually it was written, media blew up Pumwani twins story. And I'll just read now what has been said. Pumwani Hospital Superintendent Dr. Lazarus Omondi yesterday accused the media of distortion and the parent of the missing twins. We are in this position because of irresponsible journalism. Are we getting to a point, and there's also a soundbite I hope we have, that I think it was yesterday, one of our leaders was saying that should Raila quit from politics, hata magazeti hamtauza. Have we reached a point where literally we've become the scapegoat for everybody? Because now from this superintendent, he says that the reason why Pumwani Hospital is there, and we have the soundbite. I'm told we have the soundbite, so we'll just listen to this particular part.
If Raila were to leave government, even your newspapers will not be sold. Tell me how many newspapers will be sold without Raila's name in the headline. At Raila retire from politics. It's a big issue.
Nancy, what's your take on that?
On this,
Is our journalism that cheap?
No, I don't think it's that cheap. Of course, controversy sells, and I guess I'm not trying to read into what that politician was saying, but maybe that's what they were driving at. One of the, and I think we were losing the conversation here at some point. I think we are asking ourselves, how well have we done? What are the lessons that we need to learn, and how do we get better, in the next week, in the next coming days, and taking our responsibility as practitioners, as trainers. Is the media doing enough? Was that the question? Or
no, have we got to a point where media is not respected? Maybe because, for whatever reason, because we've become a scapegoat.
I think journalism is a very interesting profession that, some of the actions of a few characters then, become the reflection of everybody else. A couple of weeks ago, I think there were allegations about journalists who took some money from a politician, and how that then, made it look like all journalists do that. It doesn't mean that we do not know that these things are happening in newsrooms, but it paints a very bad image, of journalists. And that then reflects on how society looks at us. In as much as we are the fourth estate, and I know that there are reports that have indicated that media houses are the most, trusted, institutions in the country, it doesn't mean that and truth be told, that we have been perfect, or we are beyond reproach in the things that we are doing. That yes, because of the commercial interest that Eric talked about earlier, because of being the first one to want to tell the story, that sometimes there are things that we do that then go against, the principles of journalism. And this is not to all, you can't say that it's all journalists who are irresponsible in terms of what they're doing.
Right.
But yes, there are instances where, journalists have put their, their profession in disrepute because of the actions that they are, that they're involved in.
Eric, your take on that? Has journalism reached a point where we can just be thrown left, right, and center and be used as an excuse?
We are a society that seeks excuses for anything. So, when it's the media, we'll blame it on the politicians. When it's a politician, they'll blame it on, to a magazeti, It's always been there, it's always been said that. But really, the bottom line is we are not. We haven't lowered ourselves. As a matter of fact, I think we have really advanced. Journalism in Kenya has really developed over the last, let's say, last decade or more. Over the last decade, there's been an acceleration of development of journalism in Kenya. We cannot really allow somebody to come and say, for example, that Pumwani, they're saying that they are where they are
because of responsible journalism.
Of irresponsible journalism. No, they are where they are because they let themselves be where they are. We just told a story. And if the story was being told and it's being told in the wrong way, then they also had the opportunity to come out and say, no, what you're saying is not correct. This is a proper position. They never did. They played around with that whole issue of twins and who's twins and which twins. Are they twins? Were they two children? They messed up the whole story. Yeah. They are where they are because of mismanaging their own affairs.
I would agree. I think I would agree that in this case, especially in this Pumwani thing, that the media is being scapegoated in a sense. When you have a guy, one of the doctors going to Parliament and admitting that he carried out an autopsy on the wrong bodies, that is not a creation of the press. They messed up, and as we see with government every day, they're looking for somebody else to cast the blame on. I think in terms of our journalism in general, in certain aspects, I would say it's getting better. I look at, for example, it's called On the Record by Edith Kimani, which I think
on Mondays.
is fantastic. In terms of bringing context to what's going on and drawing different strands, to show a complete picture. My point is that should be happening in every story. That you tell us that you should be drawing on all these strands and telling it. I think if you compare where we are now with where we are in 2013, it's better. I think it's improved in certain aspects from even in the 90s. But I think there is a sort of institutional memory that's lost, that's not there, so that people are not building up on the basis of what they know. Everything is being sort of approached as if it is new, without looking at what roots are. So I think in some aspects media has gotten better, in others it could improve.
Okay. Clay, recently the Nairobian was voted, or rather there was a feature that was run on Channel 4 in the UK that was saying the Nairobian is the fastest growing paper in Kenya. And their tag, or what they were saying at the end, is that Kenyans love scandals, because really that's what is featured mostly. Would you agree?
I think Nairobian also caters to a certain audience, and that audience is really picking it up. I sit next to the the revised edit of Nairobian, and every time we talk about it, there's a particular audience that actually they can fail to read the paper the whole week, but they cannot fail to buy the paper on Friday. There's a particular audience that actually believes in it caters to a niche market. It's got its own market. Yeah, probably that guy was saying that it sells, but it never carries Raila stories, you see? Probably that guy who was saying that when you stop, your newspapers will never sell. Maybe he's not the kind of a guy who reads a Nairobian. But I think because of Nairobian is unique. It's unique, it caters to a particular audience, and these people are actually fast picking it up. Yes, it's got those scandals. It's Kenyans love, or rather people definitely like to read about other people, these minor things, these tidbits, you see. And I think that's why we call them gossip. But where gossip gives a connotation that actually it is false, maybe. But you see, what Nairobian carries is 95% 95% true. There's just one thing I needed to comment on about this thing about Pumwani. If I were a politician, I could have said that the remarks should be, whatever, what do they say, dismissed with the contempt they deserve. Yeah, because Pumwani's failings over the years is legendary. It is not the first time. And for them to come back and blame, to blame the media, I think they're actually, that is just another way they're just showing how poor they are, or how, that's another failure, you know, because they've run out of excuses and stuff like that.
All right,
Nancy,
excuses. Yeah,
on the Raila bit about you guys will never sell newspapers, there's always a running joke in the newsrooms. I don't know whether you guys have it, but there's always a running joke here like, hey, tafuta picha ya baba, otherwise kesha utauza hiyo gazeti. You know?
So are you saying it's true?
No. It's because, you see, people love Raila as much as they hate him or dislike him. But there are very many days that actually stories, I mean, newspapers have sold more copies when Raila is not on the cover. It's only that he has his people who actually love him so much, and then there are those people who actually hate him so much that, yes, anything is right about Raila, even the people who will hate him, the last one to see, Nini, what is it this time that he has done? Or what is it that he has not done, you know?
Okay.
So that's, I mean, it's very common to have people, to have drivers, you know, drivers of circulation and stuff like that. That's not very, it's not uncommon. It's something that happens.
It's expected.
But for this guy to say that the media will die, I think he more or less a little bit exaggerated.
Yeah. All right, Nancy, and also as you wing in on that, talking about niche markets, looking at the success of the Nairobian market, Nairobian newspaper. In the schools, are we developing curriculums for journalists to not just come and do what everybody else is doing? Because largely, you'll find that most journalists run towards politics, because that's, you know, what we're used to. Are we developing journalists who can actually look and say, mine is not politics, but I'll look for a specific niche market, even if it's, what do you call them, human interest stories, and just follow up on that?
First of all, let me start with the report that Nairobian is the fastest selling newspaper, fastest growing newspaper currently, and yes, there's truth to that.
Very quickly, I'm told that we are
out of time. It's not that Nairobians love scandals. It's not unique to Nairobi. You know, look at what Rupert Murdoch did with the Sun,
right,
and how that changed the sales of the Sun. You know, so it's not a situation that's unique to Nairobi. Targeting, I think what Nairobian has done is market segmentation, and it has known that the other papers are missing, you know, in this particular area. That is what has made, you know, some of the FM stations succeed. In as much as they're very controversial, they still have the highest listenership.
They cater to the niche market.
Yes.
Building capacity and having journalists who
yes, we are building capacity, not for scandals, you know, but for journalists who understand, you know,
scandals.
No. Who understand, you know, market segmentation, who understand the various needs of, you know, of audiences, and I'm happy to say that some of them are even working here, you know, currently, targeting very specific audiences.
All right, thank you. I think we'll have to wind it up right there. I'm told we are really out of time. So Patrick Gadara, cartoonist, communication expert, thank you for coming. Eric Latif, senior news editor, Capital FM. Thank you. Nancy Buka, who is chair for journalism department, Multimedia University, and Clay Muganda, editor with Standard Newspaper. Thank you all for being part of our panel on the newsroom today.
All right.
For you at home, thank you for keeping us company. Shortly, we're going to be looking at lifestyle, and today we'll be